Halliday Recreation Park, Scrutineering location for Australasian Safari 2012. Here with Steve Toms. We've got a bit of scrutineering going on in the shed here behind us. Now, you're in charge of the moto side of scrutineering. What's involved, mate? What's your basic role?
Basically, we're doing safety checks. We want to make sure that the riders are going out, they're going to come back in one piece, so the bikes have got to be safe. We check, the obvious things like brakes, all the suspension, the wheels, all the spokes and everything else involved with that. Make sure the throttle closes off if they let it go. They're the main things,
I suppose most of these bikes are relatively standard, but they've got additional fuel tanks and things like that, so there's a lot more to check.
Oh, obviously, yeah, there is a lot more. Most of the bikes at this level of competition, they're all almost brand new bikes, so it does make our job easy. Checking wheel bearings. They do have long-range tanks. Sometimes these events can be covering up to 700 kilometres a day. So yeah, and part of that we check the tanks, check the fitting of the tanks, check all the fuel connections, the hoses, all those sorts of things. Yeah.
No worries. I noticed the guys were putting on some blue paint on the engine blocks and things like that. What's that all about? I don't see that very often.
Yeah, no, that's just to make sure that there aren't any changes made during the competition. With the class that they're in, they've got to run the same frame, the same engine. They're not allowed to do changes along the way, so that's something we'll be keeping an eye out for, at the various stages.
No worries. And also you're checking all of the gear, and like you went right through their gear bags and everything.
Oh yes, we go right through it. Obviously, apart from just checking the rider gear and making sure they've got their boots, their gloves, their goggles, the helmet's got to be an Australian standard approved helmet. We go through all their first aid kit to make sure that they've got everything that's required. That's all part of the supplementary regulations, so they do have to carry all this gear for their own safety. Sometimes these guys could be stuck miles away from anywhere, and they may need to be able to do their own first aid before help arrives.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, yeah. I noticed they even had the floppy hat in the bag there.
Yes, well, obviously, if they do get caught out in the harsh Australian sun, they take the helmet off. If they need to have a wide-brimmed hat to keep the sun off them. Plus, they also need to carry some sunscreen and additional water. They must carry 3 litres of water in 2 containers, 1 2 litre, 1 1 litre container that they must carry with them all the time. Most of the guys are carrying that as a 2 litre camelback and a 1 litre container on the bike.
No worries. And also you're looking after the quad bikes as well. Now, you're from a road racing background, so quads are a little bit different to you?
Just a little bit, yeah, but obviously we still got to cover the same basic requirements. We've got to make sure that the bikes are safe. The obvious difference is that the quads don't have spokes, so we don't have to check them, but the steering geometry is all a little bit different, so we do have to check the ball joints and all the major components of the suspension, make sure their brakes are working, all the throttle controls, all the lights, etc. That's they've virtually got to be a road-going bike, so we've just got to make sure they are roadworthy.
No worries, fantastic. And so how long did it take you to get through one of these machines?
We've been allocated 10 minutes per bike. So we are running a little bit behind schedule at the moment. So between 10 and 15 minutes is enough to go through them, depending on whether the rider's got all their gear together and, so they come organised. If they're organised, it makes it really easy on us.
No worries. Oh, well, I hope you enjoy the rest of the day, mate, and hope you enjoy the event.
I'm certainly looking forward to it. Thank you.
And from the moto, we go across to auto. A little bit different. We're here with Daniel Rogers, the Chief Scrutineer for the cars. Tell us about what you're up to here, mate.
Basically, we're going through initially all the safety equipment. There's a large amount of compulsory equipment they've got to carry. They've got to carry first aid kits and fire extinguishers and extra water and that sort of thing. All their helmets and all their apparel and that sort of thing. And then depending on what class of car they're in, compliance with the class regulations. Some of the cars in the modified classes are a bit of a free-for-all, so long as they look like a car and they got all the safety gear, they're pretty much in. But in the production classes, where modification is heavily restricted, you just need to make sure that they're all playing the game right and end up in the class they belong in.
No worries. And unlike in the bikes, you're not going around with the little blue liquid paper putting marks everywhere. Are the guys allowed to do pretty much whatever they want as far as changing engines and things go?
Yeah, that's correct. They're pretty much, it's a free-for-all. If these guys want to change an engine every night and cart one around for each day, they're welcome to it.
I noticed as well that you were saying before when we were having a bit of a chat, they've got to carry 2 spares. That's compulsory in all classes, is it?
In all the auto classes, yes.
Roll cages. Tell me about roll cages. Every car has to have one?
They certainly do. And there again, depending on the class of car, it depends on the specification of the cage does change. Some of these cars are full tube frame chassis, where the regulations are a little different. A lot more tube work is required, but some of the production-based stuff, there is, they still have to have a full safety cage, but it's not as complex as some of the other stuff.
And when you were saying before they have to carry water and first aid gear, I suppose they've got to carry double what the bikes do because there's 2 people in there.
Yeah, pretty much. They also part of the stuff they carry is to assist, if they've ever come across an accident or what have you with some of the other competitors. So the stuff they carry might not necessarily help them, but could help somebody else or one of the motos or what have you further.
So snatch straps and things like that to roll their competitors back onto their wheels and things like that.
Yep, that's for sure.
One thing I think's really cool about the cars is the horns. Do they just have a competition? You can see who have the most obnoxious horn?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? Really, the horns are an integral part, particularly when the faster autos are catching the slower motos. With the helmets on and the earplugs in and that sort of stuff, it's really imperative that the obnoxious loud horns are something that's a really odd sound that's easier for the guys to hear, for all their safety.
No, it makes perfect sense. All right, well, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it, and hope you enjoy your week.
Thank you very much. You too.